Hi there, my name is Scott, and a couple years ago I bought an old house in the Northeast Kingdom in Vermont. A while back I used to live in southern Vermont, so I was quite thrilled to be able to have a house in Vermont again. Um, Love the house, love working on the old house, um, but unfortunately when I bought it, it didn't have a wood stove. It had the hookup for the wood stove because back in the day, the house is about 150 years old. That's, of course, what people heated with. So I spent a couple winters up in the house, a couple cold springs, and chilly fall mornings and evenings. And though the place is heated with a modern propane forced air furnace, I just missed the warmth and the ambiance and the work and the puttering around you have to do when you have a wood stove. So I decided to take the plunge, save my money, and to have one installed. So this video is going to be kind of a talk about that process, um, as well as perhaps a deeper exploration of this particular stove, the Dauntless. There's very little on the internet that you can find about it, and I think it's a wonderful stove and worth talking about. And I hope maybe the video will help, through my sharing of the experience, help you make a decision about buying a wood stove, what to expect if you have never purchased one or had one installed, and the pros and cons perhaps of this particular model, and then I'll take you through all the parts and aspects of it so you can see what I think is a pretty cool stove. Anyway, let's begin. So, flashing back a little bit, um, this is a view of nice kitchen space. As you can see, there's a chimney, goes through the center of the house in this old cape, and in that kitchen was the old school wood stove that the people who lived there for generations would use to both heat the house and to cook on. So I sort of inherited this location. I suppose I could have changed it. It might be more ideal if I was able to put the stove in the living room, but these were the cards I was dealt with, and I tried to make it work for me. So from there, I went online shopping. So as I hunted around on the internet and did my research, um, it seemed due to the square footage of my house, which is about 1,600 square feet, the Dauntless would be the right size. Not too small and not too big. So let's see, I think I've made my decision around December or of 2022, and by January of 2023 I reached out to a business near me, um, and talked to the salesman, and I ended up putting a deposit down on the Dauntless and tried to work out an installation date. Now I'll speak to this a little bit later toward the end of the slideshow and the talk, when I talk about the cost breakdown of everything and the timeline of everything. But a word to the wise: in the middle of winter, in January or February, those who sell wood stoves are probably not that busy, because not a lot of installation work with wood stoves, at least where I am in northeastern Vermont. The same could probably be said for New Hampshire or Maine. There's probably not a lot of wood stove installations taking place due to the weather and the winter cold and whatnot. In any case, a June install date was set. So now I'll tell you a little bit about how that went. Now, I decided to work with, based on some recommendations, um, a business in Derby, Vermont. And in the end, it was a really excellent experience. However, it didn't exactly go smoothly at first, and this is why I put my deposit down in January, and I wanted to aim for the earliest install date as possible, just in case anything went wrong. So I was penciled in for an early June install date. So I was eagerly awaiting the guys to come up, put in the wood stove. June in northeastern Vermont still quite chilly, and I thought I might be able to break the wood stove in, and I was excited. It was something new, and I was looking forward to it. However, we ran into a bit of a problem. When they came up to the house, they discovered that the man lift that they brought wasn't adequate for the job. Reason being, I had the chimney was in the center of the house. There were some issues with the power lines, and it was a little too dangerous to get the man lift near them. Um, they tried some different strategies, but in the end, they couldn't get the man lift level, and due to the safety features of the man lift, it would not operate unless it was level. So on that fateful June day, much to my disappointment, the install was canceled. No problem, I thought. These things happen. When can you guys come up again? Well, call the office. So I called the office later that afternoon, and the next available install date was in a month, toward mid-July. A month, I thought. Well, I was disappointed in this, to say the least, but it speaks to a big issue. Especially, I'm in a very rural area. There are very few skilled people who can do this work, and there is a high demand for wood stoves. So these guys are booked straight through, months in advance, maybe even a year in advance. So if something goes wrong, it's very difficult for them to come back and take care of it ASAP. So in the end, that's what happened. I had to wait until sort of like the middle of July for them to come back. So on a very rainy July day, and if you were following the news this summer, you know the floods that Vermont was having, the guys showed up. And I'll tell you a little bit about getting the install done now. It's quite an interesting process. If you already have your chimney lined, no big deal. But if you're going to get it done, maybe this will help provide you with some insights into what they need to do. So at least in my case, they brought this time this beast of a man lift, and this ultimately did the job. So once they position it in place, they kind of go up in it, and then they have to install a stainless steel liner that goes down through the chimney, all the way down, in my case, all the way down into the basement. So mine took about 50 feet of this sort of stainless steel liner. And you could see it's kind of a bear to install. It looks like it's unwieldy, And though it's flexible, maybe not too flexible, and it took them, quite a while to get this thing down in through the base, all the way down through the chimney and into the basement. I think it took them maybe, to kind of measure it and cut it and position the man lift and get it up there and then down correctly. Then they have to install a T like in that kitchen area, and then they had to like work to install a clean outdoor in the basement. I think all in all, this part of the process probably took them like, I'd probably say like 2 hours to do. I tried to stay out of their hair and not watch too much. I'm like a DIY kind of guy, so I tend to want to be involved, so I just had to like bite my tongue, hang out, trust them, and watch. So finally, they completed putting that liner down through the chimney all the way to the basement, and I was getting pretty excited. It was actually happening. So they unloaded the Dauntless from the back of the truck, and I asked them how much it weighed, and they said about 350 pounds. So two guys basically like picked it up, strong guys, and they brought it in through the breezeway and into the kitchen, and then they set it down on the floor, and then basically we had to kind of decide there. I more or less knew where it would go, but we had to kind of decide for sure where it would go, and we just had it come out right in front of the chimney after trying a couple different positions with some different stovepipe configurations. In the end, I had to like get a double walled stovepipe, and those aren't cheap. That one that I got was about $650, but using the double walled stovepipe, I was able to get the stove closer to the chimney so it wouldn't stick out too far into the kitchen. And finally, it was positioned. They did a little work in the basement. They were unable to finish it, unfortunately, and had to come back in early August of this year to finish that. But in the end, the stove was in position and installed and usable. So in this segment of the video, I'm going to talk a bit about some of the technical aspects and parts and controls and whatnot on the stove. Um, my situation, I don't know how unique it was, but I was in a situation in which I had to buy the stove, or I wanted to buy the stove, sort of like not sight unseen, but not seen in person. Due to my circumstances, like I couldn't really go to the store and look at it, so I was relying largely on videos and PDF manuals I downloaded and whatnot, reviews, um, promotional videos and material that were put out by the Vermont Castings Company that were good, but like really, really brief. Like not enough for me to like get a sense of things. So I'll go through each of the, parts and show you them through the photographs and video clips, so you might get a sense of what the stove is actually like. Now, as for the top, it's about 24 inches wide. The usable um, cooktop, uh, in terms of depth, the usable part is about 14 inches, and but the total depth of the top is about 18 inches. But you can only set things on about 14 inches of it, and the stove is about 24 inches tall. So when you look at it, it doesn't look huge, it doesn't look small. It looks about just right. And I really like the size of it and the look of it in my big open kitchen area. It looks kind of like a centerpiece for the room, and I think it's just about right in terms of its size. I'll talk about the heating capacity of it, which is impressive, a little bit later in the video. So as our tour of the Dauntless continues, this is the left side, and I love the name of the stove, by the way. Some people have criticized it. Admittedly, it took me a second to kind of like remember it, but the Dauntless means like fearless and full of determination. And I just think that's like the coolest name for the stove. I like Vermont casting stove names like the Resolute, the Intrepid. Um, cool name. Any case, you can see here is the damper handle. The damper handle is like the main air control. And I like that the open and closed um, signage or lettering it's kind of like engraved into the metal itself. It's not painted, so over time it won't, come off like paint might or something like that. I describe the feel of it as like high quality. Like when you handle something like that's high quality, you can tell the metal, it feels like tight, and the parts feel like heavy. The sounds come with like a clean and satisfying click. So you would use this, the damper, um, when it's open, that's when the stove is under normal operation. And when it's closed, this is when the catalytic combustion chamber is activated. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. Now, directly underneath the damper control, you can see this thermometer. Now, that's a very useful device because it tells you when the stove has reached the temperature needed in order to like engage the catalytic combustor. I have not been able to really do that yet because I've only done the test, um, the break-in fires for the stove, and but in any case, when it gets into that range, that's when you turn the damper from open to closed. Now on the right side of the stove is the air control. Um, Open, closed, and then there are some settings that are sort of intermediate in between, and as you open and close the air control, you can feel like a little clicking happening, and I think maybe it's attached to some kind of chain. Again, it feels really good quality, like there's no like mistaking what's happening. If it is this working, is it not? You can clearly feel like yes, it's opening, yes, it's closing, yes, these are the intermediate settings. And as I did my break-in fires, it clearly worked. Now here we have the top view of the stove. One nice feature about the Vermont Castings Dauntless is that it's a top-loading stove, so when the fire is going well and you have a good draw up through the chimney, no smoke will come out. So it's a pretty interesting feature, one that appealed to me. And then with the top open, this is what the stove looks like, looking down into it. This particular stove will take 18-inch length logs, and they fit in very nicely into the wood stove. Gimmick or no gimmick, time will tell. This particular stove has this grill insert. I was very intrigued by this. Um, if you are like me, and unfortunately the vent over my electric stove does not vent outside, it becomes very difficult to like cook meat or fish of any kind during the winter when all the windows have to be closed. So I was intrigued by this feature because one, I love to grill like everyone pretty much, and two, I could do it in the middle of winter um, over wood coals. So this feature, it was a little bit of a splurge. I think it was around 200 or 250. I'll have to look it up. In any case, um, like the stove itself, it seems like very good quality. I believe it's made of like heavy grade cast aluminum or steel. I can't tell. And you can see it has the cool Vermont casting engravings. It is a little bit tricky to like fit it in there, and the handle is a little bit takes a little getting used to get the handle on and off it once it's in there. But I'm super excited to try to use this this coming winter. Maybe cook some like shish kebabs in there or something like that. Throw on a steak, and then we'll see if that smoke just gets sucked down into the stove and up through the stovepipe, up through the chimney, um, and that smoky smell doesn't enter the house. So a little splurge, but you only live once, so I got it, and it didn't completely break the bank. So I figure I'd get it now, and rather than like put it off. So I might follow up and show you a video on how it works this winter. Now we'll take a look at the rear of the stove and also at the ash pan. As you can see, there is a port in the rear of the stove, and I did not hook this up yet. I want to see how things go because here you can attach basically kind of like a pipe or vent or some ductwork so that the stove can have an air intake um, from either outside, or I might try to do an air intake from the basement. In this way, the stove, the fire consumes oxygen, and that air has to come from somewhere. So it's actually coming from, in my case, the kitchen, or maybe in your case, the living room. Well, that air is warm air. It's air heated and warmed by the stove, right? So it's taking that already warmed air and then it's sucking it in. So you're losing like some heat efficiency here. Now, if the stove is vented from outside, or I might try the basement, the installer has kind of recommended that. Now I'm not going to be taking air from my warm house, but the cold exterior or basement, improving the efficiency. I'll also prevent drafts from coming through the kitchen and the living room windows if I do it that way. But I'm going to hold off on that. Now the ash pan, of course, it slides out from underneath. My sense was that it looked a little bit small. Um, I would probably say it would probably have to be emptied like once a day or maybe once every 2 days, I guess, depending on the quality of wood you're using, how much remains. Now it comes with this tray cover, and it slides over the ash pan, and then you can remove the entire ash pan, which is kind of handy so you don't have to like work like a little shovel in there to get the ashes out. That's kind of neat. But that said, I found it a little bit hard to slide that ash pan cover on the ash pan. Um, I guess time will tell if I get used to doing that or not. my thinking is I'll probably just use like some really heavy fireproof gloves and just pick up the ash pan really quickly out of there and dump it in the metal ash pail or something like that. It is kind of a neat option, but I don't know, it just felt a little bit clumsy to me using it. Of all the things that everything so far I think is like plus plus plus. I like this stove. I think this ash pan might be a little bit of a minus. Definitely not a deal breaker, but like a little bit of a minus. Okay, here we'll take a little bit of a tour of the inside of the Dauntless. Look at those nice, white, clean, virgin fire bricks. Beautiful inside. As you can see the irons there to prevent the logs from hitting the glass. You can see the damper door, and behind, in the way back, you can see where that oval shape is. Behind that is where the catalytic combustion device goes. Unfortunately, I forgot to take a picture of that, but it's basically rectangular and has a honeycomb shape. There's nothing fancy about installing it. You just sort of like slide it in there and then replace the ceramic door. So, this past summer was, of course, one of the hottest on record. But up in this tiny northeast corner of Vermont, at the beginning of August, we had a cold front, just in time. And the night temperatures descended down into the mid 40s. So, with that in mind, though it was still probably a little bit warm to start getting the break-in fires going, I could not resist. I just simply couldn't. I was too excited. So I followed the advice of the installers and I did 3 break-in fires, each one getting progressively hotter until finally, on one chilly night, I let it rip and got it up to full temperature. So here you can see the break-in fires. Of course, the fires don't get that hot, and when they don't get that hot, then the fire produces a lot of smoke, and it gets the fire bricks and the glass and all that, pretty dirty, full of soot. So I think that's the situation here. In any case, here are the first fires, and it was really fun building them. I got a pretty good draw going up there, up the chimney. I can see the smoke going up, and all in all, I think it all went pretty well. Now I got the traditional black finish, and as the installers told me, as you get your fires going, it really starts to bake in the paint. And this is something that isn't done at the factory. And as the paint gets baked, an odor is produced. You can smell it. It's not overpowering, but I did keep the windows open and I did have a fan blowing just to get the smell out. And by the time I got the full fire going, like when I was really letting it rip and getting it up to temperature, at that point the odor was gone. So after I got the stove up to temperature, full temperature, after a few break-in fires, um, I guess I would say probably to get up to like operating temperature and building a hot bed of coals, it'd probably take like an hour, hour and a half. But I would say once that stove is hot, it's kicking. I don't think I'm gonna have any issues heating the house. It's about 1,600 square feet, not including the 2 enclosed porches. So I would say like safely, like I have a little bit of extra heating power and so that's a good thing. I didn't get a stove that was too small. I think I got the right stove. And man, that thing can really belt out the heat once it gets going. Just a few words about the glass doors. I think they're really beautiful. The glass is quite thick, feels quality, heavy, everything you'd expect. Because the fires I was burning were not particularly hot. I had some issues with soot on the glass, and so I had to get it off. I tried the ash wet paper towel method. It worked. It was a little bit of a pain, but I had a can of this easy off odorless oven cleaner, and that was like money. That worked pretty well. So hopefully when I get the fires up to really hot over the winter, I won't have issues with this, but if I do, I will probably continue to use the easy off. So I thought I'd wrap this up by talking a little bit about the cost and the timeline. All in all, I think, as you can see from the breakdown, I think, I had some discounts thrown in there somewhere or other, but I think all in all, it cost me between 8K and 8,500, something like that. Hopefully, I won't get comments like, bro, you overpaid way too much. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But unfortunately, the closest business who could do this job, who sold wood stoves and had people who could install it, is an hour and a half from where I live. And the fact is, they charge you come in and going, which is fair, I guess. Also, consider this: there's a big tax credit for installing a efficient, new, modern wood stove. So that's also an incentive. I believe it's somewhere around 30% on the stove and the labor. So that figure that I just quoted is going to drop a little bit. Um, Lastly, I think it's better to act sooner than later when you want to do this. Um, Maybe decide in the winter, January, February, on the stove you'd like. Try to schedule a spring, early summer install date, just factoring in things might go awry. Um, its first attempt in June, the guys had to bail on it because of the man lift issues I mentioned. They were able to do about 85% of the work when they came back in July, but then they had to come back again in August to work on the masonry in the basement and put in a better clean out door. So you might count on repeat trips. It's understandable. They're showing up at a job and they have to figure out problems right there on the spot. So my friends, that's a wrap. Thanks for watching the video. I hope it was helpful, and good luck to you as you search for your wood stove. Bye now.